Welcome to Hashtag with Navguzi Chwanuka. This is a place where we help you unravel social constructs, discuss self-development in line with mental health, emotional well-being, and everything in between that directly or indirectly affects us in the millennial world around us. If you're hearing my voice for the first time and are the kind of person who is not scared of being a better version of yourself even if it requires you to contradict who you were 24 hours ago, consider this your virtual home. I'm your host, Navguzi Chwanuka, and I cannot wait to engage with you in the various conversations. What is so bad about home that you cannot go back there and settle? Once there was a time made me realize what privilege looks like and to appreciate how we indeed experience life differently. While there are real victims of war, I only experienced the tragedy of war in a book. When I read Once There Was a Star, I found myself fully immersed into it that I almost failed to draw the line between my real life experience and what is in the book. I found myself leaving home while looking over my shoulder so that anything that looks suspicious of another war finds me alert. It required me to keep reminding myself that the war was just in the book I was reading. Weeks ago, I sat down with the author, Meshack Yobby, to talk about the relevance of this story, why he chose war for his debut novel, and how heavy the creation process was. If you have read this book or are a lover of a good story, this is the episode for you. Let's dive into it. Meshack, welcome to Hashtag with Navguzi Chwanuka.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You sound
great.
Been a while. Oh, what do you mean it's been a while? You've not been here before.
It's been a long time coming. Okay. I've been waiting on you.
Well, you just called me a senior space. Sorry, disrespectful.
I speak truth to power.
Meshack, tell us a few things that you'd want the listener to know about who is on the mic on the other end.
Okay, I am a storyteller in a nutshell. I work as a TV director. I am a newspaper correspondent, and I am a writer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't speak a lot. I'm actually very quiet. So
you're very quiet.
When I'm silent, it means that the answer is complete.
Amongst the things that you've mentioned, are there things that you're doing from your childhood?
From my child, I'd say writing. Yes.
Writing.
Yes.
From what age?
I grew up around the Kenya National Library Services headquarters, and almost every weekend we'd spend at the library reading storybooks, picture books, listening to storytellers that the library used to bring, and that was my foundation in storytelling. So even in primary school, I used to write pretty good compositions. Went to high school, continued writing, won awards every single year until I finished high school. So I'd say my childhood foundation really set the tone for writing for me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
When you mentioned the part of composition, I'm like, bro, are there chances that I was competing with people that were already exposed? Because you'd enter an examination and they're like, talk about, I don't know what. Then you come up with a story, and for some reason now I'm like, wait, I think I can manage fiction, because I used to think fiction was really hard, but then if we have to draw back to high school,
yeah,
these guys were actually tuning us for something, but it was for examinations, man.
Yeah, it was for examinations.
Yeah.
It was, but you know, I used to think that fiction is easy, but it's not. I don't believe that it is. Because you see, there are two kinds of writers.
Yeah.
Fiction writers, at least in the African context, the ones that I've experienced. There are people that will pull a story out of the air and write, you know. It doesn't need, or not that it doesn't need, but they don't do any research on it. There's no really depth or context to a lot of things. And unfortunately, that's the general kind of writer that we have. But think of the best sellers in the world, the best writers in the world. Those guys do a ton of research. If you read Dan Brown, for example, who is not popular among certain circles, but that guy does his research so much that you can put down the book just to Google something that he's written to confirm whether it's true or not.
Oh yeah, I've done that.
I
do that. I do that in the books.
Yeah, guys like Frederick Forsyth, who wrote The Day of the Jackal, and the depth of research, man. You can actually picture those locations. You can picture what this person is doing. You can picture the politics of the time. It's fiction needs a lot of research. Unfortunately, not very many people do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that, to me, I think is the difference between a great story and an average story.
You've answered, because I was wondering, there was a question I think that came up to mind at some point, and I didn't have the exact words to it. It was just faint, but you've, in a way, answered that question.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the need for the process of research and at our... I don't know, between us, you and I, yes, between you and I, there is Once There Was a Star. Me as the other side as a reader, and on your end as the author.
Yes.
How many pages was I in, and I was already screaming for my life?
I don't know whether to apologize or celebrate.
No, if you celebrate, you're a psychopath. You're like, oh my God. But for some reason, and I think, I'm sorry to put it out this way, but for some reason, I think this is how we get stuck in abusive relationships. You see that something is not good, it's actually rattling your nerves, but you keep going. You're like, let me see, I think there's something that will be good. So this is what really, to be honest, that's what I could say.
I've been called a sadist because of that book.
Oh, you have?
Yeah. Yeah, so that has been the general reaction when people read the book. My sister's colleague bought the book for her husband, and the report came back that if he ever phoned me, he'd strangle me.
Ooh, that's a lot. That's extreme.
There's so much to talk about that book.
Take us through the process of research, because I noticed I think one of the questions that I may have asked in the beginning of my reading, you mentioned, I asked whether these people were actually real. I don't know. I don't remember how I posed the question. I think it would require me to roll back in our chat, but you were quick to clarify for me that there weren't real people, but I could not snap out of the fact that they weren't real. I was gripped by the story. I couldn't get out of it. So if you're talking about fiction and the need for research, how did you approach the research process for the Somalia Civil War as you portrayed it in Once There Was a Star?
Yeah. Okay, so the characters were all fake apart from the leaders at that time. Those ones were real. But what I wanted to do was to take fictional characters but give them real experiences. And I had compelling reasons for that. I am not Somali. At the time that I began writing, I had not even been to Somali.
You hadn't?
No, I hadn't. But there was the Somali population in Kenya is pretty huge, right? And I want to answer your question, but let me just start from the beginning. Let me start from what compelled me to write this story.
I wanted to ask at the end, because I was like, wait, you hadn't, and you're already writing it. So let's get from the start.
Yeah, and then I'll go to research. Right? Okay, so I think it was in 2015, thereabouts, that I happened to go to Dadaab refugee camp, which is one of the world's largest. At various points, it has been the world's largest refugee camp. I think the latest figure that I had is that it hosts around 700,000 refugees from East Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were driving around the camp, I saw things that looked like, when plastic bags get stuck in the bush, how it looks like.
Yeah.
That was the general appearance. It was like plastic bags stuck on shrub in the far distance. But guys told me, you know what? Those are actually people's houses.
Wow.
Yeah. There is basically no room to stand in there. There's no bedroom. There's no living room. It is just a shelter. Not the whole of Dadaab is that way, by the way, but that part of the camp looked that way. And that was the reality in Dadaab refugee camp started, because before the Somali civil war, it was just the local population that lived there. But when the refugees came in, then those are the only houses that construct, very temporary looking structures. But in the end, it turned out that those were, that was home for very many years. And during that trip, I met this group of young people. And as we were saying, I asked them, what is the one thing that you guys really, really crave? And they all said freedom. And that stuck in my mind, because I'd never really thought about what freedom was before then. Because when these guys are in the camp, they cannot leave unless given permission. And getting permission to leave the camp is not easy.
Yeah.
It's a process that can take months. So you have people who'd been born in the refugee camp, and 20 years on, they'd never left.
20 years?
In fact, more than, because there are people who were born there, got married there,
No.
they now have kids there. So Kenya is not home because they were born refugees. Somalia isn't home because they know nothing about Somalia. The entire existence has been in Dadaab refugee camp, which they cannot leave. So it's basically an open air prison.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I saw the living conditions and their thirst for freedom, I asked myself, what is so bad about home that your parents and you cannot go back there and settle? What is so bad about home that you have to live here in this refugee camp, which you cannot live depending on food rations? Basically mean barely having any meaningful shelter or work, because where do you get employment in Dadaab?
Right.
So after leaving Dadaab, I took time to do a bit of reading about the situation in Somalia and what caused the civil war. So that was the beginning of my research. So, and in doing my research, I had to go back to way before the war started, when Somalia was peaceful, and it had all these people from all these countries visiting the beaches and tourist sites.
Yeah.
You had this cathedral built by the Italians in Mogadishu. It was beautiful, majestic. You had people who were living the Somali dream at that time. It was the time when President Siad Barre had introduced the Somali alphabet and forced literacy upon millions of Somalis. And it was such a period of nice growth. And Somalia, I think it was called the Pearl of Africa.
Is it?
Yes, at that time. Like
it had the name, or?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, like
which time is that? Are you talking about pre-colonial times? Because
no, I'm talking about the period between independence and say the 1980s when they were in fact no, up to until 1977 thereabouts.
1927.
Because 1977.
77. I think we already had that title from who gave us that name? Was it Sir Henry Martin Stanley, whatever that name is? One of those explorers are the ones that called Uganda the Pearl of Africa. So I don't know.
But why did they even? No, it was called the Pearl of the Indian Ocean.
Oh, nice.
Yes, not the Pearl of Africa, the Pearl of the White Pearl of the Indian Ocean.
White Pearl.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
These colonialists gave us pearls when they don't even have pearls, but yeah. Anyway. Or are there pearls in Uganda? I don't know. I've never even seen a pearl.
Yeah, the plastic.
So Somalia was the white pearl of the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
Very beautiful, majestic coastline. And I had to go back to that time because everything has a beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The country didn't just erupt in war. So in the research that I did around that time included reading newspaper stories that had been archived from that time. I'd read reports from non-profits operating in Somalia at that time. I looked at YouTube videos from that time, shot from military sources and government sources. Some of them subtitled, most were not. I read stories from people who lived at that time. There are a couple of books which I read, listened to music from that time. So it was a pretty intense period of research. I think I read well over 120 documents before I even started writing, and that's not even including the YouTube videos or the music that I'd listened to or the couple of books that I'd read.
120 documents.
Yeah. And these are not one-page documents. These are full 50, 100-page documents.
Wow.
Thankfully, I got a chance to film in Somalia. And I think at that time I started writing. And coincidentally, it happened that the places which I intended to mention in the book were the places which I got the chance to visit. So after visiting Somalia, I came back, I trashed whatever I'd written, started writing again.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Because there were different perspectives that you had gotten?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because it's one thing doing a desk research, it's another thing being on the ground, meeting people, talking to them, living the experience. You just come out with a very different perspective.
Yeah. Are there some challenges that you may have encountered during this research phase?
Language barrier. Goodness me. Goodness me.
No English?
The English is... The people who have the story, they don't speak English. You need a translator.
Oh.
Because this is an old story. So the people that would have the greatest insights are pretty old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm very fortunate that I have quite a number of Somali friends. So whenever I ran into problems, I just asked them for help and they'd sort me out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, a lot of information was destroyed in the war.
By a lot of information being destroyed in the war, what do you mean?
In terms of books, literature, when the war started, it started as a clan war, then it changed, became an Islamist war, blended together with the clan war, and there was this whole attempt to remove every shred of Christianity and everything associated with Christians. So if there are documents which were not written by Somalis, those ones were destroyed. If there are documents written by Somalis who don't believe what you believe, those ones are destroyed. It was a whole mess.
And that made it harder for you to do your research, Amma?
It did, because, I'd want to have a full picture from all perspectives when I'm writing. So my work is not to pass judgment. You are right, you are wrong. Once There Was a Star is a work of historical fiction. It's not my work to pass judgment. It's my work to just say, this is what happened. This is the story. This is the effect of what happened. Mm-hmm. So, and that's one of the reasons why I took quite a bit of time doing research, so that I get different perspectives. Because before I'd even started research, I knew that President Siad Barre was this bad dictator, of Idi Amin caliber. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. I'm speaking to a Ugandan. But, like he's made out to be this monster. But when I was researching, I found that actually had pretty progressive ideas until he took Somalia to the Ogaden War and it backfired on him, mm-hmm. and the population turned against him. So now, because he became paranoid, he started being a dictator to protect himself and his. But before that, he's the guy that introduced the Somali alphabet. He's the guy that made sure that almost the whole country was literate. And that's one of the effects of the Somali alphabet. He's the guy that I think in 1975 said that women had equal inheritance rights with men. And it put him at odds with the religious leaders at that time. He's the guy that when there was a famine, I think in 1972, 73, thereabouts, he airlifted nearly half of the population to an area which was fertile and had rain, just starvation. So he wasn't entirely bad. Mm-hmm. Until his later years. If information is destroyed because you don't believe what I believe, then that denies me the opportunity to have the full picture and to tell the full story. Yeah. But I believe I did my best. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm now speaking from the perspective of Ugandan. I don't know what the Somalis, are they Somalis or Somalians? I don't know what they would say about it. But then when you talk about the part of the challenge of language barrier and mm-hmm. also going as far as meeting old people, and they know for sure that you are not one of them, how were they willing to give you this information? Is it a story that felt like they always wanted to tell it?
It's a combination of factors. How you approach how you approach someone will how well they receive you and how much they will cooperate. So remember, I'm also a filmmaker. So in whenever I do documentaries, for example, this is something that we encounter a lot. We tell uncomfortable stories. So I'd say that part of my work experience helped me to navigate that in terms of knowing how to approach people for information. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then on the part of going as far as the war and the details that you had, not even just the war, because I think even when we went as far as culture, like you said, the part of, I don't know which writer you mentioned, that someone finds themselves Googling stuff. Yeah. That book took me long because I had to also do research to understand some of the things that I was seeing in there. But then I think that now when it comes to what I wanted to ask, you have sort of answered it, that as a filmmaker, or you have ways of approaching people. And when I read about the female circumcision bit, I think I don't know, was it the first question I sent you so many questions.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first that he sent.
Because it's like, oh my God. And then I had to read. And I feel, personally, I don't know, I would feel like I'd have to take a couple of days without digging further. But then there was so many other pages that unfolded.
Yeah.
How much time did it take for you to do this research? Because there's also a period where you disappeared. You went from someone that I loved to read from to he's gone.
I honestly, I think on and off it was around 3 years of reading and researching. Because the thing is, I didn't want to just read and write right away. I wanted to really understand what I'd read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even things like the female circumcision, I actually made that story a bit mild. To believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. I made it a bit mild.
Were you worried about the writer?
Not really. I was worried about the reader.
Yeah, the reader. Sorry. Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry for taking your position. Sorry. The reader.
Yeah, I was worried about the reader because there is so much that happens, even in this day and age, that will be really, really hard to believe if you are not in proximity of the act itself. So we have people who don't believe that, female circumcision of that nature exists, but it does. Even as recently as during the COVID period, we had those female circumcisers going around in Somalia, in Mogadishu, knocking on doors, asking, do you have a girl that needs to be circumcised?
During COVID period?
Yeah, as recently as that.
Oh my God.
It's something that still happens to this date. I have friends who've undergone that procedure. So yeah, I made that story a bit mild because imagine because this is a very cultural thing. And now imagine what during the time when there were no needles.
Mm-hmm.
What else is sharp that you can think of that is naturally occurring?
Thorns?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
God.
So it's...
Oh my God.
Yeah, I actually made a huge part of that book very, very mild because the things that I uncovered during research shocked me. And, even from people just reading the book, what I realized is that people don't understand what civil war really is. People don't understand what the negative elements of culture are, because we are so much removed from those things that we believe that what our reality is the reality around the world. But that's not it. There are people who are living completely different lives, and that life to them is normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because I knew that my readers were not primarily traditional Somalis, I had to make a number of things mild.
I was only introduced to female circumcision in school, something that is examinable. And you don't really take these things serious,
Yeah.
You just have to know which culture practices this, but you've not actually interacted with a girl, maybe, who has undergone the procedure. So reading about it, you're like, bro, these are so many years since I learned about these, and I've seen activism going on about FGM. But it was after reading that I was like, wait a minute, what is this thing up about actually? Wait, what is this? and I felt like, oh my, this is betrayal. But then you do that to your child. You know,
Yeah, and you know the thing is, it's so deep that if you're not circumcised, then you know there are all these playground touts, like, you know, you have a clitoris, you can't talk.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, that is supposed to be natural. How are you excluding me from? Oh, that book was alarming. Jesus Christ! And I told you, I was like, how is this your fast? How do you choose this as your fast book? Truly, what kind of person are you? I was like, what?
These things still happen to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a time, are you comfortable with talking about your emotional side of it when you were doing the research? I understand you've come to the place of saying that as a filmmaker, you have a way of approaching things, but you as a person, what might you have experienced in this process of research and preparation of the book? You know, emotional impacts. Are there any things that you may have experienced? And if so, what are some of the strategies you used, coping mechanisms? I hope you used healthy ones.
The book, you know, at some point I took a pause from writing.
How long did it? Tell me, how long did it take for you to start writing? How many months did you take?
I think it took around 6 months of writing, 6-7 months thereabouts. But at some point, I stopped writing because it felt a bit too much. Because, you know, there's a difference when I'm researching. I am reading what other people experienced. You know, so there's a level of psychological distance from
detachment.
the subject. Yeah. But when I'm writing, I want to be the character. I want to be in the mind of the character.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that I'll be convinced that I'm actually communicating something that feels real. So I took a break. It became too much for me at some point, and I said, you know what, I don't have to do this.
Those are so many bodies that you had to take on.
Yeah.
Those are so many people. Wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. So I took very, very many long walks, 15, 20 kilometer walks, just listening to music, trying to release any pent-up emotions. So that by the time I get home, I am tired. Endorphins are coursing through my body. I feel better. But what I discovered is that, you know, I can't write. You know, I can't be in the house full time writing this story.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend at that time, I think we were having a conversation, and the way that I answered, she told me, man, I think I know what's happening. We can talk about this later, but you just take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the parts of writing which I don't think I have fully mastered, because I also don't want to be that writer that is so detached from the characters. It doesn't feel real to me. And if it doesn't feel real to me, then it won't feel real to you. I have to be the characters.
Is it something that you guys as writers get to talk about? Do you ever have discussions on that?
I'd say with a few writers, yes. But remember what I'd say, that the majority of writers that I know don't really go to such accents. You know, there are people that just write. They pick a topic and write and publish the book. You know, there are so many books which you will read and you won't get moved emotionally. the ones that I know that take this approach, then yes.
Because I think the first person that may have mentioned this, I didn't have any idea that let me not say I didn't have any idea, but I never thought about the side of writers experiencing these kinds of emotions in their work. But there is an actor that I had a conversation with. He's really good. And he told me that most cases when they are done with a shooting phase, he wants to withdraw from the public. He is extremely exhausted because he has taken on the character of the other person. In most cases, the things that he takes on are those of a villain.
Yeah.
So he only highlighted it a bit, and I think he didn't want to have an expound conversation on it because probably he is scared. He might not have to get cold. Yeah.
It actually happens. There are very many actors that even go into therapy after filming. You have actors, I don't know whether you've heard of method acting.
I think that's what he said. I've forgotten the name. Yeah.
In method acting, you actually take on that character and that character becomes you, whether you're filming or not, until the end of the project. So if you're acting like a person with a disability, then you are in the wheelchair permanently. Whether you're going home, whether you're going to bed, whether you're going for lunch, you're in that wheelchair. If you're acting like a really, really horrible character, then you're horrible throughout.
Yeah.
There are actors that even get an injury, and if that injury accentuates their whatever role it is that they're doing, then they won't even go to hospital. Yeah, so it's something that happens, I think, in the creative space. You have to find ways of letting those emotions go and remembering who you are. And I think at some point now, I remember at some point during writing, I kept telling myself, remember who you are. Remember who you are.
Remember who you are.
Yeah.
How often were you doing that? Because now if you have to portray, I've forgotten the names. It's been a while since I read the book. But there was Sarah. Sarah was the mother.
Yeah.
And then you had to portray her emotions, the husband's emotions, the daughter's emotions.
Yeah.
The son-in-law and all those things. You're like, at what point do you actually really, really remember who you are? How do you come to a place of separating yourself? You're like, okay, now it's a break. And then go back. I am asking this because I have watched some intense things. Like I was talking about some show on Netflix.
Yeah.
It was so intense, I think more than 2 hours. I don't remember how long it was.
Yeah.
And I saw people in the comment section talking about how they've watched it twice or 8 times. And I'm like, I can't. I cannot. I cannot. And I don't know if I'm just a softie in a way, but perhaps we have to draw back from your end. Maybe we have to just draw back to the impact that you hoped for this story to have. Because much as some things might be gruesome,
yeah,
I believe when someone has an objective, they want to see through it to the end.
Yeah. So in terms of impact, I'd have to go back to the beginning. What compelled me to write the story, and that was basically the plight of refugees. And through the research and writing process, what I wanted people to understand is. I wanted people to appreciate peace and good governance. And these things sound so simple, so non-profit speak. So but it's when I was in Somalia, for about a week or two. It was scary. So you've seen movies which have these bombed out buildings, and people with balaclavas and guns, and you can't drive below a certain speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
It was that way. I was there, and gunshots became so normal that whenever gunshots rang out, I was like, cool, let's go on whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
No.
I kid you not. Like it was that normal. And now let me tell you, at the airport, when we landed, got into this vehicle, when we were heading towards leaving the airport, there were these soldiers that came in and handed our driver a pistol.
Okay.
Like it was so casual, so normal. And then our driver told us, we can't use the same route to our accommodation twice. So if this time you're going via the front gate, then we'll return via the back gate. We're never ever taking the same route twice. We are not allowed to stand at the balcony to bask in the sun because we don't know who is going to look at, who's going to spot us. You can't drive at below 120 kilometers per hour. It's crazy. It's crazy how much we take peace for granted and good governance. And it's only until you lose it. And Kenya came to the brink of it in 2007.
Yeah, 2007.
Yeah. It's only when you lose it that you realize the value of peace. It's only then that you understand why you can choose to live in Dadaab refugee camp in a makeshift shelter, depending on handouts and rations which are not enough to last for a month, than go back to the bombing in Somalia. So that's one of the impacts that I wanted the book to have for people to understand the importance of peace. I also wanted people to appreciate the impact of war on families.
That was harsh.
Yeah, because when war breaks out, it doesn't just break out at once. Wars will break out gradually. Fighting will break out in pockets here and here and here until it's this huge thing that is difficult to control. And you never really know when the fighting will land at your doorstep. And when it does, your basic instincts kick in. It's flight or fight.
Right.
And if you choose flight, if you talk to refugees from Rwanda, from where, they will tell you that once you are on the road, when the bullets start ringing out, when the grenades start landing near you, you want to protect yourself first. So you will scamper to whatever place that is safe before you realize, what? I have no idea where my brother or sister is. I have no idea where my mother is.
We studied about these things.
Yeah.
You say that? Like that's how I felt guilty in the book, because in I think social studies or history, the basic history things, they're like, okay, so what are the side effects of war? You're like displaced families. You're just listing things with enthusiasm. And this is something serious.
It is. Yeah,
I wish we really had serious storytellers in as far as these classes were concerned. We would be more empathetic. But this business of writing, you're like, I got
it
that.
becomes academic.
Yeah, that is all I knew until you're like, wait, this can be real? And you're only finding this in books.
Yeah. So imagine you have, you're running away from the fighting, and somehow you're separated from your family, and you end up at a refugee camp. You don't know where the rest are. Then suddenly you hear, oh, that one went to Denmark. How?
Wow.
Where? Then you hear, oh, by the way, man, war is bad. So when people are fleeing for safety, the weakest people will be left by the roadside to die. Because you can't, because they'll slow you down.
Survival for the fittest.
Survival for the fittest. You had kids being left, old people being left by the roadside to die.
Kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
War is terrible. I think we're too sheltered. Because, some of the comments from people who read the book were like, you are just exaggerating some parts.
Is it?
Yeah. The people were saying that I was exaggerating some parts just to milk emotions. But
well, you milked my emotions. Why did you milk my emotions?
But the thing is, the people are fake. The events are not fake, and that's one thing that people don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
The events are not fake at all. So whatever is in the book actually happened. These are things that I double, triple checked before writing.
Mm-hmm.
So when people think that we're milking emotions, then it just tells me that, you know what, we've really had peace for such a long time that we don't know what war is.
We don't.
Because if you look at the Hamas-Israel conflict and you look at the videos of people being shot in their homes or children being pulled out of the rubble because bombs fell on the building. If you look at the conflict in South Sudan where military guys were seen beating people to death and shooting them on the ground, and they put these things in a book, people will think that you're crazy and they're making things up.
But now, what are we saying with these guys? Wars are happening right now. What the war in Gaza?
Mm-hmm.
The news is showing some of course, not everything.
Not everything.
Yeah, but I saw something that really broke my heart. Let me see. There was a kid who had to inspect dead bodies to check if his parents were there.
Yeah.
So they opened one bag and he confirmed, I think that was the dad. And then they opened one bag and he broke down and he was just on his knees and held that person whom I suspected to be the mother maybe. And in my head I was like, why are they doing this to the child? They should have just left him. It's like, oh my God.
But now imagine growing up not knowing where your parents are instead of knowing that, my parents actually died. Now imagine the effect of that war on that child for the rest of his life.
I hoped at least there would be an art. Anyway, I don't know. Everyone is displaced, like we said earlier.
Yeah.
You just can't know which adult is around for the confirmation of people's identities. Yeah.
Because do you know, the government of Somalia actually bombed an entire city. Almost 70% of that city of Hargeisa, which is now in Somaliland, was destroyed by government bombing. We had militia going around and some soldiers going around slaughtering all the male kids that they could find so that they don't grow up to become the opposition. And you put these things in a book, people think that you're lying and making things up. War is horrible. It's something which I really, really hope to never, ever experience. Because it alters everything that you believed and everything that you stand for. But now, these stories need to be told. However difficult they may be, I believe that these stories need to be told, because if we don't tell our stories and our history, then who will? How will we learn?
Then who will? And I think it's important for us to also take charge of our stories.
It is.
Yeah. Wow. So going back to you, away from the work that you had to put in for Once There Was a Star.
Yeah.
Generally, when it comes to your mental health, what does self-care look like to you?
First, I love nature. I love my walks. I believe, not that I believe, whenever I take a really long walk at sunset or at Karora Forest, which is nearby, at the end of the day, I feel lighter. So it's two things for me. It's those long therapeutic walks, and it's also get out. Because there's a point that I was really, really in need of release. And the moment that I spoke to a friend, I just felt something lifting. It's not that the problem is solved, it's not. But you just feel that you have a better understanding of the issue, and you are more renewed to find out. Things always seem difficult or more gigantic when it's just in your head. You're not talking it out, you're just thinking it. You're thinking about it, and you're making it look bigger than it really is. So having a community that is supportive and non-judgmental, a community that can just listen to you without judging, sometimes without even trying to offer solutions, but just recognizing that this person needs to let something out, and I'm here for them, I'm giving them space to release, then that works for me too. Yeah.
That's great. So as we come to the end of our episode that you thought was going to only last 15 minutes, which actually feels like 15.
It's been an hour already.
Not yet. Not yet.
Really?
Almost.
Okay.
Just almost. What are the few words that you would want the listener to walk away with? And we're also closing the year. This is going to be the very last episode of season 4. So yes, you're closing
Feliz
down
Navidad.
the show.
Feliz Navidad.
Where does that leave the Muslims if you're singing that?
Merry Christmas and have a happy New Year. Hoping that this new year will see me release my second book, which is in the works.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to answer any questions about it right now.
Yeah. Because I have no idea what it is about, so I'm not going to ask. And I don't want to be the person that spoils it for you.
Yeah.
All right, Meshack. Enjoy your new year.
And thank you very much for having me. I think your podcast is very well organized and planned.
You do?
I honestly do. I think that the conversations here are very substantial. Yeah. So I'm hoping for more prosperity for you.
Amen.
More listeners from all around the world.
Africa mainly.
Mm-hmm.
I need them. You need to get me the Kenyans. The Kenyans have been stuck in the 3rd position for a very long time.
But you have so many fans in Kenya.
What do you mean so many fans? They sit at, let me have a look at the statistics here. Let me see. They're in the 3rd position in the demographics.
After?
Geographically, they are in the 3rd position. Kenya sits at the 3rd position.
After?
There is Uganda, United States, Kenya, United Kingdom, and then France.
How are the United States beating us? We're your neighbors.
But the United States took the lead for a very long time. I had to fight. I had to fight until they entered position 2 and Kenya rose to position 3. So I'm trying hard. I think it's my I don't want to say that I'm trying hard, but it should be my goal next year to make sure that the top 5 are African countries, at least. Not just 2 countries. I need more of them. Yeah. Okay. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy your Christmas break. And I hope for the best for your 2024.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
This episode marks the beginning of the end of season 4. This year has been wild. What? Wild. While I was feeling like I was underperforming, I look back at the months and I'm like, oh my god, this happened? You mean I did that? So while this is the last episode of the season, I'm definitely going to come back next week to say proper goodbyes. But for now, I would like to really appreciate you for listening in, and I hope that you have hit the subscribe button. I'll also roll out what we shall be doing during the break. I'm going to take a 5 to 6 week break. So in those 5 to 6 weeks, we shall hear from me what will be happening in that period. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Hashtag Nabuguzichwanuka. If you loved what you heard, make sure you subscribe to Hashtag with Nabuguzichwanuka in your podcast platform of choice and share it with your friends, loved ones, and everyone you believe is affected by the millennial world around us. Also, feel free to share your insights about what connected with you on social media, and be sure to tag us. We are at Hashtag with Nabuguzichwanuka on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter. Our handle our handle is at HTNK Podcast. You can also use the hashtag HTNK Station. I look forward to hearing from you. Like Meshack says, everything has a beginning. Season 4 had a beginning, and we're now nearing its end. Goodbye.